The VSC 8000 HS is at the other end of the spectrum in terms of document examination, whereby this is going to be used in a very different way. So the VSC 8000s are a much more manual examination process, but this is where we have a lot more variation in light sources, optical magnification, and software functions that we can use for document examination. So here again, we'll place in one of the playing cards. And the immediate difference here is that I would need to select an area for examination, particularly under high magnification or high detail. So again, here I could use the combination of the magnification and the XY stage to start having a look at some of the damage and details here. Switching to side lights, where again I can see some of these details and this damage a lot more clearly. This is where again I could switch between different light sources, again looking at the coaxial, again looking at some of the surface features and damage on the card as well. So this is a much more manual process. However, we do have features where we have, for example, auto-examine, which is where I can run a more automated image capture where I can simply select the light sources and options that I would wish to run. A feature that you have on the PDI Plus and the VSC 8000 HS is the 3D imaging. So although we could do this on both systems, I'll give an example of how this can be done on the VSC 8000. So this is where I'll capture some images of the surface of this card here. Again, we could use the 3D imaging to have a look at these scratches and damage in more detail. Once the images are loaded into the 3D imaging software, I would simply just need to select the area that I wish to process and click Generate and wait for the surface to be generated. Once generated, I can then enlarge the image and then use the variety of display modes to display the surface details in any way that I wish. So here we can see the 3D imaging is showing the creases and damage to the surface very, very clearly. I could then capture these images to be part of my casework. So here we have another example of a card, and this particular card has a shiny sort of reflective portion. Now in the visible light, just with the naked eye, we can see some scratches and some damage, but we'll show you what that looks like visibly and then using some of the other light sources in the VSC as well. So this is the card under just normal floodlights, and if we zoom into certain portions, we can see evidence of some damage and scratching. If we just focus, there we go. But some of the larger scratches are reasonably visible, but if we switch over to the coaxial light source, this works really well for, say, flat reflective surfaces. Again, we can see examples of these scratches in much, much more detail. As well as on the non-reflective parts, there is also another little scratch here that was very difficult to see under normal white light, but under coaxial that is reflecting a lot more strongly. There's also evidence on this particular card if we switch to the side lights, and if I just adjust the exposure, we can see that there's some either dirt or damage that's actually stuck on the card itself. So with the side lights, we're actually able to see the shadows created by this particular feature here as well. Again, if I focus on that, there we go. So in the coaxial light, that just looked like just a dark area here, so maybe a little bit of a scratch, but under the side lighting we can see it is actually something actually stuck on the card itself. On the reverse side of the card, again, because the Pokemon cards have a slightly reflective surface, again, this means the coaxial light is a very, very useful light source. So if we switch to the coaxial light, if I just focus, again, you can see areas that have damage and scratches, and it will also highlight some of the creases and damage in the card as well. So if we zoom in and have a look at this particular area here, where are we? There we go. We can see some of the scratching and damage in the corner. The side lights is also another good example of showing this as well. Again, using the left or the right to see some of that damage as well. There's another area here where there appears to have been some kind of adhesive label or some kind of similar item stuck on the card itself. So visibly you can see some residue of this, but again, using the coaxial light, you can see some of this residue. Again, it's not reflecting as the same as the background of the card. But again, a better light source is the side lights, where we can actually see again this kind of residue that's damaged the surface of the card itself. So this is another good example where the owner of this particular card deemed it to be a reasonably good condition, but we can see even very quickly within the VSC we're able to identify quite a lot of areas that have been damaged, and also how much it's been damaged, which makes it a lot easier to see compared to just visible light and a microscope. Another feature we could use for examining the surface of the card is the 3D imaging. So in the VSC 8000HS, we can use the 3D imaging tool here. In this case, I'm going to capture a 3D image from the entire rear card. So we'll just give this a name, and we'll just wait for the images to be captured and then the 3D surface to be generated. Once the surface has been generated, we can then rotate, zoom in, and use the various different tools to change the color mapping so we can see that the card is slightly curled on the edges. So another way of identifying whether that can be marked in a poorer condition if the card is slightly bent. And we can also use the tools to again have a look at some of the scratches on the surface of the card and around the edges as well.